Hello and welcome to the Bitcoin Standard Podcast. Our guest today is Muaawiyah Tucker. Muaawiyah is an accomplished educator in Islamic law, Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, and blockchain technology. Since 2006, he has been teaching Arabic and Islamic studies, and later he expanded his expertise into computer, Bitcoin, blockchain, and cryptocurrencies with a focus on the Islamic perspective. Muaawiyah has produced a lot of videos and articles about his view on why Bitcoin concords with the Islamic perspective on money and Islamic Sharia. And I'm keen on getting his perspective on this topic, which I found very interesting and we've discussed repeatedly in this podcast. So, Muaawiyah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Alhamdulillah. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for that.
So to begin with, first tell us a little bit about your background and how you found Bitcoin and Islam. I presume you've told me, I think you weren't born Muslim, right? You converted, right?
Yeah, so...
so you're British, right?
Yeah, so born and raised in London, and I was kind of raised as a Christian. I won't say devout Christian, but in the sense that I used to willingly go to the church without being told to. As in, my mom wasn't a churchgoer, but I decided at one point I wanted to get close to God, you could say. That was when I was in my early teens. And then I guess in college, I was approached by someone about Islam, and I had no idea what Islam was. I thought Muslims worship monkeys and pigs and stuff, but then I discovered, no, they don't do that. So I went down the rabbit hole. I found out about Islam, and then when I was about 17 or 18, I accepted Islam. And about 2 years later, I got accepted to study Islamic University of Medina in Saudi Arabia, and where I studied there for 7 years and achieved a degree in Islamic law. So I went from born Christian, became Muslim in college, went to Saudi Arabia, learned Arabic for 3 years, and then 4 years I did a degree in Islamic law. That was my, in brief, there's a lot to say, but that's my brief journey from that to Islam. And then when I graduated in 2008, I returned to the UK. My aim was to teach people about Islam and Arabic. That was my main thing, so I set up an Islamic institute to do that. And along the way, I came across Bitcoin. Now, I didn't come across Bitcoin in a way to make money. That was never my intent. I think from 2012. Well, actually, from the very beginning, really, I was kind of against fiat and banking, but I didn't know why. I guess you already know this. When we kind of have this, we all have this feeling that something's not right, and I felt something was not right. And especially when my first year, when I was studying in Saudi Arabia, my wife and I, we were in Saudi. It was in 2001, and without any warning or explanation, both mine and my wife's bank account was closed. Shut down. And it was at a point when we actually really needed money, because obviously we just literally landed in Saudi Arabia. I was just a new student. I had nothing other than myself and my wife. And I tried to access my money and it was shut down. I think it was just soon after September 11th, so I don't know why, but they just shut it down. And they never gave me an explanation and anything like that. So I was kind of against banks from early on. And when I graduated and I wanted to set up my institute, I was always a kind of gold bug. I had this idea that gold is a better money and it's free and all the rest of it. I went down that whole rabbit hole of, we have to return to the gold standard. That was in 2011 and 12. And then I did hear about Bitcoin. I knew there was a thing called Bitcoin. I never rejected the idea. I kind of liked the idea because for me it was like gold. And I think everyone who's not too biased in gold, if they hear about Bitcoin, they'll accept it. As long as they're not too much invested in gold. I think that's probably one of the reasons why people have issues with Bitcoin, if they're gold bugs. If they're too much invested in one thing, it's become difficult to accept something else. I wasn't too much invested in gold. I liked it, but I didn't do anything about it. It was like a good idea, nice, great, but nothing happened under that. But then I think 2017 or 16, again, more issues with banks. I think it was PayPal this time. And I was trying to accept payments on our website for lessons and courses. And I think they had some issues attaching PayPal to my website. And I was so frustrated with the whole system. I thought to myself, why can't I just accept payments online without having to go through all this nonsense of proving who I am and whatnot? So I said to myself, let me try this Bitcoin thing. Let me see if I can add a plugin to my website that I can accept payments. And at least then I could just bypass all of that. So I found the plugin on WordPress. I downloaded the app. I installed this new feature that can accept payment in Bitcoin. So I went to Coinbase, bought some Bitcoin. I tried it out. It worked. I paid for my own course of Bitcoin. I was like, yay, it worked. And I was so over the moon that it was so simple. I just paid for it and I got my money. It was in my hand. I was like, yeah, great. And then that was it. I left it. I went back to life. And then about a month later, I was checking on my website, see what's happening. And some reason, the money I paid was more than what I paid. I was like, what? Why is it like almost double of what I usually paid for? I didn't understand. And then that was kind of the beginning of my journey into Bitcoin. So it was never about money go up. I mean, that kind of brought me to look into it more. But for me, Bitcoin was more this avenue to escape banking. That was my beginning, and it's still my mission today.
Yeah, all your life you're used to your money stealing from you, and then this thing was just giving you more suddenly.
I mean, I'm sure you know, as for Muslims, we always have an issue against banks anyway, because we don't want interest, and we always fight them in the banks with the interest. We try and tell them, I don't want your interest, just give me a normal credit account with no interest, and we had to go through that whole issue. So we've always had this ongoing frustration with banks. But then when Bitcoin came along, it was like, okay, here's my solution. It was straightforward. There was no resistance. There was no ideology to defend. It was just straightforward. Okay, this is the way forward. And then that was it, really.
Yeah, I think if you just come at it from first principles without any kind of brainwashing and baggage, as a Muslim, it should click very quickly. It should make a lot of sense very quickly, because if you think about it objectively, if you were just teleported into this planet today and all you knew was your Islamic background and you knew nothing about fiat or Bitcoin, and you examined the two, it would take you very little time to recognize, well, clearly this fiat thing is very, very against everything that Islam stands for and against all of the teachings of Sharia when it comes to money. Whereas this Bitcoin thing, there's just no reason to object to it. I think it's very difficult to find a problem with it. But of course, most people don't think from first principles. Most people don't think in this kind of objective way. Most people bring their baggage and their brainwashing and their habits. I think most people are creatures of habits when it comes to thinking about things. And so all my life I've been using the dollars and the banks and all of these fiat things. So I'm emotionally and, religiously invested in the idea that there's nothing wrong with that, because coming to terms with the fact that I've spent decades engaging in something haram as a Muslim is a very tough pill to swallow.
Yeah.
And when you first hear about Bitcoin, it has all of the hallmarks of a Ponzi scheme or a scam. I mean, this is people telling you could get rich quickly, and people saying that this thing is going to go up, and people saying it's guaranteed that nobody can change this or mess with it. It'll raise a lot of red flags for you, but if you were to actually think it through, I think you would arrive at your conclusion. And it's disappointing that not enough Muslims so far have seen this, but you and I are working to change that. So
I mean, I would say, looking at, from my years of engagement with Muslims, including scholars, trying to explain the situation, I would say that me personally, I have a kind of an advantage. Two aspects. One of them, well, three, I would say. One of them being that I'm not a stranger to going against the grain. I mean, I accepted Islam in the first place. That's the biggest thing one could do, to go against the grain, as in going against your family, your heritage, your identity, quote unquote. So if I've already changed that, then changing my currency is not that much more difficult. So I've already made that one step. Secondly, I'm already tech savvy. So I was already into technology in the first place. I built my own websites. I actually learned how to code myself. So I already have access to technical knowledge in that respect anyway. And thirdly, I've always had a long-standing hatred for banks in the first place. There was a reason to look elsewhere. I think those three things come together for me, which would make it easier for me to accept it. Whereas, from my experience of engagement with others, like for example, we're speaking to some scholars who lack, for example, the technical understanding. For example, what is a blockchain? How does it actually function? What is hashing? What is it? These things is like it's just nonsense to them. It's like you just give me words. All I want to know is this. You just want to get to the point. And there is no, unfortunately, there is no quick way of learning Bitcoin. Unfortunately, you have to do the homework. And ironically, the moment you are willing to do the homework, just the willingness to do the homework, I think that's a big step in itself, where I think most people are just not willing to, because, I mean, this is a bit of a controversial thing. I feel it might be a controversial view, but I think that for some people, for them to acknowledge Bitcoin is a better option, or a good option, or the way forward even, they have to kind of acknowledge that they missed the boat. And I think some people just don't want to admit that they missed that boat. I'm not saying this for everyone, but we've all heard of Bitcoin years ago, when it was like $1, $100, $1,000, and for some people the idea of saying, well, I could have learnt back in the day, but I chose not to. If I was to now say that I was wrong, many don't want to say that. They're invested in what they're doing, and they dig their heels in. I'll be like